For now, let's jump over to timcast.com. Before we get started, become a member, help support our work. We have this story that we're going to get into in a second about these two guys, these two people accused who have been found not guilty. As a member, you are helping support all of that great journalism, and you will also get access to exclusive segments of this podcast Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. We have a huge library of content, so you definitely check out all of that stuff. You'll love a lot of these videos. Not so family friendly. Lots of swearing. Yesterday, we had a deep discussion with Andrew Klavan on religion, which was very, very interesting. He had to leave a little bit early, but it was a fun conversation. So don't forget to join at timcast.com. Smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's read this, the first story here from timcast.com. Breaking. 2 men accused of Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot found not guilty. 2 others receive mistrial. The jury deliberated for 5 days following a 2-week trial. They're going to mention on April 8th, the jury found Daniel Harris not guilty of 1 charge of kidnapping, conspiracy, 1 count of conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, 1 count of possession of an unregistered destructive device, 1 count of possession of an unregistered short-barreled rifle. Harris was the only one of the 4 defendants who testified in his own defense. Brandon Caserta, who was charged with 1 count of kidnapping conspiracy, was also found not guilty. The jury declared a mistrial on the charges brought against Barry Croft Jr. and Adam Fox. The charges include kidnapping conspiracy, conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, and possession of an unregistered destructive device. The U.S. government claimed the men had been planning to kidnap Whitmer at her vacation home prior to the 2020 election and arrested them in October of 2020. All 4 men have denied the government's accusations. Didn't it turn out that the majority of people involved in this were feds or some kind of informant? Yeah, it wasn't even like an actual plot. Let me show you this from the Daily Mail. They say how undercover FBI agents infiltrated militia group Wolverine Watchmen to try to take down Gretchen Whitmer's kidnappers. They say, what do they call it? Stoned talk? They said it was nothing but stoned talk that the government turned into a real conspiracy. Wow. Schwiers and Bates both testified at trial. So look, without getting into, hashing out the entirety of the trial, the story's been, I think for most people, fairly obvious. As soon as they said, yeah, it was a bunch of FBI agents that seem to have been orchestrating the whole thing and then blaming these guys who are bumbling along for the FBI's own plan. Along with this story and the story about January 6th, where the 3rd trial, this guy was like, the cops opened the door and let me in. The judge went, yeah, the video shows the cops opened the door and let you in. Not guilty. The media narrative on what? Insurrection, the rise of the far right. It's all just bunk BS. Yep. Bunk BS. Panel, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. The entire narrative started falling apart a couple months ago. And honestly, when it was first reported as a story, I remember watching my television, regrettably checking Twitter, saying, wow, this is really horrible. And for the people who are actually committing legitimate acts of violence and breaking in, yes, that's bad. I think we all agree that's criminal. But I should have known that the media was spinning this, trying to make it out to be something it wasn't. They started to refer to it as an insurrection, which is interesting because it's an insurrection where basically no one who went, the vast majority of people, didn't have weapons on them to try to overthrow the government. Just a very bizarre narrative, but I think people were too afraid to question it because they didn't want to seem in support of it because our media spent so much time calling it a terroristic act.
I just tweeted out earlier that I don't trust screenshots, pictures, or video anymore. I don't trust it, man. Yeah. I don't trust the narrative. I don't trust the media. It's going to be even hard for me to trust people face to face, which I really don't anyway. But man, I don't want to get tainted on humanity here, but I'm not buying any of this crap anymore.
Well, I hear you, but you're not necessarily getting tainted on humanity. I think it's okay to acknowledge that known liars are known liars, and you shouldn't listen to them without having a pessimistic view of humans in general.
I think you shouldn't trust cartoonists. Especially political
No, so
animators.
Here's the thing, and now I would disagree. I think, well, in most instances, that's probably correct, but there are a few good apples, I think.
That's exactly what an animator would say.
I know, right?
Seamus, if you have a bowl of M&Ms and 10 of them are poison, take a handful. Not all bad apples.
Hold on a second, Tim. That's ridiculous. First and foremost,
that proves it, Seamus.
M&Ms are all bad. They're sugary. They'll kill you.
Gross.
You shouldn't be eating that stuff.
What do you think, Lauren? You think that there's some value to this, the media narrative at the moment?
Well, I think you're in a situation where you obviously had a situation where people wanted to expand the power of the government, where people wanted to expand the power of the security state. You wanted these people to be dangerous. We've seen the fallout from this. They've been purging the military of people who have any kind of connection to Trump, any kind of support, any if you were an NRA member, you could be on a watch list if you were in the military. because of this and possibly up for being removed. So I think this is part of a larger interest by kind of those in power to make sure that you have the apparatus that is able to crack down on people. And we hear this all the time from the media, right? The biggest national security threat is, the white supremacists, these radicals, these crazy QAnon people. This is constantly being pushed for a reason, because it allows you to kind of take that war on terror apparatus and shift it domestically. And I think that, this isn't, I don't think that this is the only part of it, but I think that leads into that narrative for a reason.
But you know that the response from many Democrat activist types is just they're flabbergasted. How is it that fascists are getting away with all of this? Because even when it's proven in a court of law to not be true, they just say it is. So I feel like regardless of whether or not the state is empowered by this, they got what they wanted. Hardcore hyper polarization in this country. The Democrat activists are still going to continue to be radicalized by these fake news stories. The acquittals in the January 6th case and here do nothing to change that.
Well, when you control the consensus making apparatus, there's no reason to back off the story, right? If you continue to push it, it doesn't matter what the facts were at the end of the day. You control the flow of information, and if you can continue to blast that out, then someone who really wants to dig into it can eventually find it. But the vast majority of people aren't going to do that, and so the narrative that is sitting in people's minds is that this went down, everything went down the way it was originally portrayed. No one goes back and looks at these things years after the fact to figure out if that was actually the case, and they end up taking the win.
I was just watching a bunch of documentary on the rise of the Nazi Party in 1933. Hitler appointing of Goebbels to be the propaganda, and what was he, the Enlightenment Minister, some crazy title. And they seized the radio. They took control of it. They shut down slowly over time. First, the book burning, which is in the schools. The professors were like, hey, kids, don't wait for the government to make this policy. Just go out there and destroy the knowledge now, the non-German stuff. So the kids were all like, yay, we think we're doing something good. And then when they got a hold of the radio, man, talk about manipulation. They shut down the other channels. You couldn't get anything out in Germany if it wasn't state propaganda.
Control of information. But the issue is, even with the internet grants you the ability to manipulate, but also for the opportunity for truth, like people watching this show right now. I think the difference between the people who watch this show versus the people who watch Young Turks is that for Timcast IRL listeners, new information will change their mind. For the Young Turks viewers, new information must be fake news, and they'll completely ignore it. So like this story, like January 6th, they just act like the revelation didn't happen at all. And so it almost feels like the media narrative is irrelevant at this point. They could say anything, and these people would just be like, we don't care. We'll do whatever you say, no matter what the story is.